both in the short term and the long term. Very interesting things going on at the moment, and of course it is coming up to the start of winter 2023-24. Thanks for clicking on to the Wednesday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. It is hump day, and we do have a colder surge of air moving in from the north as we move towards the Friday and weekend time frame. But I want to emphasize a couple of very important details. Exactly how far west that area of high pressure gets will dictate how much cold air comes into the pattern. There is also some rumblings in the model of a shortwave area of low pressure moving across the Atlantic. That may help boost high pressure up towards Scandinavia. And there is some models indicating, including the GFS, of colder air running around that area of high pressure and westwards towards the UK and Ireland here. But it's all speculative. There is a lot of complexity to the pattern, and I will try my very best in the next 15 minutes to explain some important details. The Madden-Julian oscillation is becoming a bit stronger, moving through the Indian Ocean. That in turn may be helping lead to that warming of the stratosphere over the Siberia side of the pole, and that could later down the road at least lead to some very interesting things in our weather pattern here. But there's a long way to go, of course. There is a lag as well. There is we have to see whether the stratosphere and the troposphere may couple. Remember, there's quite a disconnect between the tropospheric polar vortex versus the stratospheric polar vortex. But quite often, when the Madden-Julian oscillation is rotating through the Indian Ocean and towards the maritime continent, that can release tremendous thunderstorm activity over the Indian Ocean. Sometimes that then bumps up against the Himalayas and forces it upwards, up towards the upper levels of the troposphere and into the stratosphere, and that can lead to warming within the stratosphere over Siberia. And it looks as if that is happening, by the way, as we go forward. So you notice here that as we look towards the period here, so this is an interesting graphic that was put together, I believe, by Marco Patagna of the Met Office. And this is a couple of years ago. This I think I first seen this. And it shows here what the various MJO phases correlate to the type of pattern that can be expected across the northwest portions of Europe. So notice here that phases 1 promotes high pressure over Iceland, low pressure over Europe, less settled conditions in the southern UK. And lo and behold, for the last 4 or 5 weeks, we've had a phase 1 MJO, albeit it's been fairly weak, but we've seen the high over Iceland, Greenland, even Scandinavia, forcing the storm track further south, areas of low pressure one after another. And of course, that added boost of warm waters over the Atlantic has been increasing the rainfall. So we've seen that exceptional record-breaking 30-day rainfall over France, parts of the southern UK, parts of Ireland as well, has seen tremendous amounts of rainfall with that MJO phase 1. In yesterday's video, remember I may have came across a little bit pessimistic with regards to a cold outlook for the UK and Ireland. I want to emphasize something. I'm only talking about the first couple of weeks of December, not talking about later down the road here. There is a lot of very interesting things going on, of course, with the winter forecast. As I've already said, there is going to be interesting caveats, interesting little twists and turns with regards to the winter forecast. It's not clear cut. It is not, based on strong east-based El Nino that is going to drive a warm winter across the northern hemisphere. That is not the case, folks. The El Nino is acting very different this year. Sea surface temperature anomalies look as if it's an east-based El Nino, but we are seeing a cooling against the South America coast. We continue to see warming over the Central Pacific, and in turn, that can lead to some very interesting weather down the road. So the MJO is expected to rotate through phases 2 into phases 3 possible, and then eventually into phases 4. That then promotes a positive NAO, so the trough over the North Atlantic, Northeast Atlantic, higher pressure further south, Atlantic driven. That is something that I think may happen as we move into the month of December. But of course, the GFS is indicating a Scandi block, easterly wind coming in, bringing prospects of cold and snow. Like I said, it's a very complex situation, but we can't rule out this positive NAO, mild unsettled conditions of the Atlantic for the UK if this was to happen. Because if you look at the MJO, you can see exactly what's shown in the models here. So this is the what's happened so far, and you can see that we're rotating out of phase 1 into phases 2, possibly towards phases 3 and 4 as we move towards the latter half of this month. Here's another way of looking at it. So you can see here that where we're at right now is around phase 1. Then it's expected to stay well out of that circle, that null phase, so fairly amplified at the moment. Moving through the Indian Ocean, as you can see here, phase 2 and 3 is rotating across the Indian Ocean, and that therefore what is interesting is the fact that if we go back to the current setup here, you can see the warming showing up over the region that would be to the north of the Indian Ocean here. Watch this space as we go from week 1 into week 2. Bang, strong warming showing up towards the North America. So this is the Eastern Asia, North America side of the pole. And as I've emphasized already, this can lead to cold surges coming into North America, but in turn can then lead to a stronger jet over the Atlantic, positive NAO. Remember, if you've got the core of coldest air, sometimes I think there's a connection between the stratosphere and the 500 millibar pattern, even if there is not a proper coupling. I still think that when you've got the core of coldest air within the polar stratosphere over our side of the polar region, what you're doing is you're sending the trough into North America, and you're actually enhancing the trough then extension out of North America across the Atlantic and into the UK. And I believe there is an emphasis, there is a concern that that is the case, that we have more Atlantic influence than what you may want to see here. But then, of course, as we continue to progress through the period here, and this is going into the longer term, remember, is you're starting to see that warming now starting to show up closer towards Greenland and the Baffin Straits here. So what you want to see is this strong warming continuing to progress, not staying where it is. So this position right here over, Siberia, extending into Canada here, you don't want to see that. But notice here that we progress further. It moves a little bit closer to Greenland as we go into the period between, what would that be, the 11th and the 18th of December. Remember, you don't need a sun stratospheric warming to get strong North Atlantic Greenland blocking cold conditions across the UK, Ireland, as well as North America. I understand that. You don't need a sun stratospheric warming. You can get a proper weakening of the vortex, and the models are really all on board with that. That can lead to interesting things down the road here. So, CFSV2. This is a slightly outdated version because it's now currently updated, so I don't actually have the latest run just yet, unfortunately. But look at this pattern here. We've got this ridge up the western side of Canada here, poking its nose into Alaska. We've got the positive on the north shore of central Siberia. You're then driving colder southwards into North America here. We've got this ridge of high pressure close to the UK and Ireland here. So what we've got is we've got the pool of very cold air over Scandinavia, Central and Eastern Europe here. We've got the high here over and and just to the west of the UK and Ireland. Notice here, week 2, what happens? We strengthen the positive over Siberia. We also shorten the wavelength over the west of North America. We're increasing that trough, driving it south into the eastern side of the United States. That then in turn pulls westwards the area of high pressure over the Atlantic, and that should open the door to something colder coming in from either a north or northeasterly direction into the UK and Ireland. But it's all about the details, and we have been here so many times before where that area of high pressure stays a little bit too close to the UK and Ireland. We have to emphasize that point. We've seen that in the winter of 2011-12, where literally we had bitterly colder on the other side of the North Sea. Amsterdam had minus 18 Celsius. The UK missed out purely because of that scenario. So exactly where that area of high pressure remains positioned will dictate how much cold air gets into the pattern. Watch this. This is the CFSV2, and I know it can wash things out, but notice here we are starting to hook up the area of high pressure between Russia and Northwest North America. That then in turn is leading to a negative NAO signal. But look at this, we've got that extension of the trough, not only extending from Canada to the UK and Ireland, but also with a stronger high over the Azores as pushing the storm track further north here. So therefore, that is the concern that I have, is we keep that open door to the Atlantic and we don't truly get anything major. You have to shut down the Atlantic in order to truly get colder into the UK Ireland pattern here. So it's like I said, this is a very complex situation. Moving forward, let's have a look at the GFS and see the 850 temperature profile and see the evolution of the next few days. Area of high pressure southwest of the UK and Ireland. We've got relatively mild air coming around that area of high pressure. There's the cold air. There's a sea of cold air around, folks, and that's another thing that needs to get taken into consideration. Look at this cold air coming into Europe here. But watch as we play through the loop here. See what takes place. Cold air sinks south with that southbound cold front. The area of high pressure just moves enough to the west northwest to allow this cold air to come down the chute here off the GFS. Notice here that the area of high pressure keeps Ireland just slightly marginally out of that very cold air, but the UK and Ireland on the whole sees cold air coming into the picture. Any type of snow, it'll be high ground to the north, maybe some mixing down to low levels, but I can't see any true accumulation. Further south, I think your snow chances are quite minimal here. This is not an out of the ordinary cold spell on the face of it just yet, but watch what happens here. Notice here that we've got this area of warm over the east side of Greenland here. That has to get taken into consideration. Notice here that the area that there then forces areas of low pressure south, and then with a building high over the Norwegian Sea, that then starts to allow some of this cold air over Scandinavia and northwestern Russia to start to push westwards here, and you can see exactly what's taking place. That, folks, is a fairly cool pattern, I must admit. With that area of low pressure over Biscay, you need to watch out for some snow prospects, but this is a long way out. This is a way to the end of next week. Certainly the GFS is showing some interesting things. Let's have a look and see what the ECMWF is indicating. Back to the same period here. Cold air comes south. Eventually, area of high pressure sneaks just enough to the west-southwest to allow that cold air into the pattern. Watch what happens. You can see here, very similar to the GFS. It keeps Ireland and Northern Ireland largely out of that core of cold air. Is it going to allow the cold air to move westwards like the GFS? Not so much. The area of high pressure, Anchorage, stays a little bit more over the southern half of the UK. Therefore, we've got this fight between mild air coming around the top of that area of high pressure and moving east into the UK and Ireland. Essentially, what that's doing is forcing the cold air to then not back westwards. It's forcing it south and southeast. So there's key differences between the GFS and the ECMWF. And you notice here that there is this sandwich between cold air, polar maritime coming in off the Atlantic, and continental Arctic air trying to move westwards towards the UK. And as per usual, the UK is in the battle zone here of air masses. So going back to this, temperature anomaly at the 10 HPA of the ECMWF, if this continues to develop and grow, what may happen is we correlate this quite nicely with the longer term pattern. Now, I am concerned about the month of December. I am not convinced that it's going to be a solidly cold month. But watch what happens. We've got this negative. This is the multi-mode run. ECM, Met Office, Meteor France, CMCC, all them thrown into the picture here, by the way. This is December. You can see here the negative just northwest of the UK and Ireland here. Then we start to see the building of a high latitude block in North America, Greenland, north of the UK. That is an increase in cold pattern. Then in February, the block increases. And then even into the month of March, the block is there. Mid to late winter, I think, folks, is going to get very interesting if this strat warming continues to grow. Lots of things here. Keep it right on the channel. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you again with more details tomorrow.